Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of good service, charity work, community service, and just we spread positivity here on the show. Loads of inspirational stories, and I've got a very special guest with me today. He is a wrestler, actor, model, host of the Road After Hours podcast with WWE Hall of Famer Teddy Long, and he's got a lot of stories to tell us today. Please welcome Mac Davis. Welcome, Mac. Thank you for coming on Wrestling with Heart.
I appreciate it very much, man. We've been talking about this for a while, and we finally got it down to where we could do it. So I'm happy to be here. All
right, awesome. So tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. I grew up really I'm one of those kids that people wouldn't believe today, but I was extremely shy as a child. I didn't really do much. I didn't associate with a lot of people because I just wasn't sure of myself. And as time went on, I ended up, while I was growing up in Savannah, got into radio. And radio ended up being really the place where I started to blossom and kind of come out and go, you know what, I think I can be more of me now. I don't have to hide myself anymore. And I got into radio, and that was it. And from that point forward, man, my personality changed, and my name changed as well. People who knew me in school knew me as a different name. I use my middle name now as my first name. And so a lot of people, when they find out, they'll hear me on the radio, or they'll hear me doing a podcast or see me on TV or something, and they'll be going, that can't be the same guy. That can't be. And it is. It is.
I love that. I'm actually in radio myself, so I find that really fascinating, like-minded people going into broadcasting, going to school for broadcasting and getting that degree and, starting off, I know that, when you start in the radio business, you start in the smaller markets, work your way up. Tell me about that experience for you.
Radio for me, when I first got in the radio, I was working at a skating center. I was a DJ for a skating rink. And one of the owners of a radio station came through, his kids were there, and said, you know what, you might be pretty good on the radio. Let's put you over there. And I was lucky enough that I got into radio, and I hate to say this because you're not going to be able to live those times, and it's unfortunate. But when I was in radio was still a star-making platform where you would have talent who would go into radio stations to build their characters. No matter what they wanted to do in entertainment, radio was a great place to start. And I started out working overnights from midnight to 6. And of course, that's usually they put you in the graveyard shift when you first start, or you're punching buttons on the weekend for recorded shows. And I got into the midnight to 6 and started doing some oddball stuff. I would have little segments and comedy bits and stuff that nobody had done from midnight to 6 before. And it started building my confidence. As my confidence got stronger, I started getting moved up the schedule of the radio station. I went from overnights to doing, evenings. And from evenings, I went to morning show as a co-host of the morning show. And from that point forward, I ended up getting a job offer in Florida to run my own morning show. And I did that for many years in St. Augustine, Florida, until I ended up in Jacksonville, Florida, doing morning show in Jacksonville. And that was for a rock and roll station. And we would do crazy stuff. I mean, crazy things. We would have Topless Tuesdays and stuff like that. It was just crazy things that we would do. But It was a lot of fun. But it built the ability gave me the ability to build what I wanted to do in the future. And that was to continue to entertain in one form or another.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, moving up the ladder, over time, building that confidence, developing bits. You said you worked at a rock station. Were there other formats too that you were working at as well?
I did. I worked a variety of formats in radio, and as you know, or you may not know yet, but you will, and eventually. In radio at those times, you better have a U-Haul truck attached to your automobile because you live and die by ratings, and so you travel quite a bit. A lot like wrestling, you would go pop from town to town and try to make a name for yourself. And so yeah, that was a little bit difficult in the beginning, was the popping around, but I began to embrace that as well, because I enjoyed meeting new people and having new opportunities to prove myself. And that's really what radio was. It was a way to prove yourself and try to be better than you were the day before. I spent a lot of time in show prep, and a lot of people on radio now, they basically rip and read. They, here's the title of the artist, and here's what time it is, and here's the temperature and the weather. But people, I'm convinced, for people who listen to radio, they want something different. They want somebody unique, who's different, doesn't sound like everybody else, and gives them something different. And when I say different, let's say you're playing in country music. If you have country music, well, every country music station plays the same country music. The only difference is what's between the songs. And that means it's you, it's the DJ, it's the guy who's on the air telling people what's going on and what's happening. And that's the part about radio I really liked. Knowing that you could put people in the palm of your hand and let them listen to you and want to respond.
It's that little nugget of information, those nuggets of information that you want to, let the audience know, who you're listening to, what songs are playing, things going on in your community, hence, one of the reasons why, I started this podcast was to talk about, the community. And, we obviously share a love of wrestling. So, a lot of stations I know have had on wrestlers in the past. Have you ever had a chance to speak with anybody during your time?
Yeah, that's how I got into wrestling. I was in radio, and we would get stage tickets, go backstage and meet the guys and stuff like that, and get liners and stuff for future shows that would come. So I got backstage, and I got to meet a lot of the guys and do interviews with them. And that's really where I started going, maybe I could do this too. Because a lot of the guys would say, you're really good. You ought to consider trying this. I think you might be good at it. And that's how I ended up getting into wrestling, was through radio. Radio really has opened the door for me in more cases than I can tell you. Even today, as we're speaking right now, I still do work. I still do voice work for a lot of people. I'm working on a video as we speak right now, right off to the side here. And so I'm still involved in that. And I love the fact that radio opened those doors for me. Had I not gotten into radio all those years ago, I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing right now.
No, I mean, that's the cool thing about, living in the 21st century is you have options. You have, you're building your brand, radio, wrestling, television, podcasts. You have it all at your fingertips. It's not just one thing anymore. It's everything.
Absolutely. And the hardest part about radio today, or even in wrestling, is the attention span. It used to be you could hold somebody for 1 or 2 hours on a program. You're lucky to hold anybody for a few minutes now. You've got to have bits of information that people want to hear. They can catch, it's kind of, I always say this, it's going to sound crude, but I'm going to say it anyhow. I kind of say this like, it's like going to the bathroom. You'll read a magazine in the bathroom. You'll read just little articles, just short ones, and you put it to the side and you'll pick it up again later. That's pretty much how we consume all of our media now. We just take a little bit of that information and then we move on to something else. And we keep popping around just this, to make ourselves happy with what we want to hear. And then we don't really hear the entire, story of what may be going on. And I hate that. I like the fact that we have short areas where we can learn something very fast, but I hate that we get away from the true stories of telling a story. That's difficult to do. And that's difficult to do on radio because you're usually trying to do it in a matter of 8 to 10 seconds. Or if you're in wrestling, you're trying to get it under 2 minutes, so right. you're really trying to rush a lot of information in a short amount of time.
Do you feel that? Why do you feel that's changed, in your opinion?
Well, I can tell you right now here, I'll show you what caused it. The phone. The phone has caused the difference. Everybody's into their mobile phones. They need it now. They need it fast. They don't want to have to wait, and they don't want to hear you go on about it all day long.
Right.
So that's basically it. I really think that the phone has become the devil's toy, and I hate to say that because everybody uses it. We all live with them, and it's a must for all of us. But the truth is, when I was a kid, before there became cell phones, it was a much better place and much easier time. Sure. And honestly, I think it was a lot more creative.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with that. 100%. The internet is both the best and worst thing in the world, so you kind of have to take advantage of it, to make the most of the situations. But yeah, I feel like it was just easier to get along and to have camaraderie. So yeah, I definitely 100% agree with that. But I kind of want to switch gears. You said you got into wrestling through radio, but were you a fan of wrestling growing up?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I would watch wrestling quite a bit. I was the only one in my family, still am to this day, and that includes my grandkids and my the rest of my my kids. Uh, None of them are big wrestling fans. Now, my two youngest grandsons, they're into wrestling, but they're not rabid about it like I was. I would watch it on the weekends. Every Saturday, I'd pop up and I'd be watching wrestling. I wouldn't let anybody know. I didn't tell my friends about it because it's still at that time, it was still kind of one of those things. Oh, you're a wrestling fan, that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah.
And there was a lot of wrestling fans. They just didn't want to come out and let people know that they watched it. And so I fell in love with it at an early age. I remember all kinds of matches. I Harley Race and going back to those days when the wrestling to me was still gritty and true. It wasn't so showman type as it is now. Nowadays, I said this on a podcast just recently, to me, wrestling's become more of see what we can do instead of watch us fight. And I don't want to see what you can do. I don't want you to put on a performance. I want you to compete. That's the difference in wrestling today. Back when I was watching wrestling, it was a competition. Now it's a performance. And there needs to be an even keel between both of them to make it really interesting for me now.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's been a lot of influence, and especially with the recent merger that has happened, I kind of said to people over the years, UFC's kind of stolen some stuff from wrestling, and wrestling's kind of stolen some stuff from UFC. Do you feel that there's some truth to that?
I do, but I think that's just taking what you see in somebody else's product and making it your own. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think anytime you see something that's being done correctly, I think you should grab a hold of it and try to implement it within your own program because it just makes you better. That's the reason I like competition. I like the fact that we have AEW, WWE, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling. All those things give us, a choice. And without choices, wrestling will become very boring. And we know that because we saw that happen with WWE for a period of time where all they did was give us these PG moments that were just kind of, you almost felt like they were going towards a 5-year-old child. I'm not 5 years old, and I don't like being talked to that way. No. And I don't like my programming coming to me that way. No. Treat me like I'm a wrestling fan that enjoys the competition.
That's why, I started watching, kind of showing my age here. I started watching like at the tail end of the Attitude Era, but I kind of grew up around the Ruthless Aggression era. That was sort of my childhood era. And I was, I still am very fortunate to have caught that because I feel like that was up until now. I feel like that was the last vestige of, oh my gosh, this is smash mouth, gritty, hard hitting wrestling, and both, Raw, SmackDown, even the stuff with TNA had some of that, but specifically with WWE, I feel like that was like that last really great period of action.
I think that's the PG-13 era kind of came to an end right around there when Teddy Long, who was my co-host for Road Trip After Hours, Teddy was during the Ruthless Aggression era, and the Attitude Era. And I've asked him before, what was his favorite? Attitude was his favorite era, but the Ruthless Aggression era really was the last time we got to see, as you say, in your face type of wrestling. Anything could happen. I'm starting to think, though, that that's about to change. I'm hearing that because of the merger with UFC, we might start seeing an edgier product. And there's a possibility that we might see even a different channel that they pop up on.
Very interesting prediction there. Yep. Who were, like, growing up, like, some of your favorite wrestlers to watch?
Sting.
Really, who?
It's Sting. Yeah, Sting was my favorite one, bar none. When I was growing up and in my 20s, Sting was big, and I was really into wrestling at that point. And Sting was the best thing going. So I was backstage, and that's where I can meet people like Sting and Lex Luger and people. And I started to gain an appreciation for the men who were behind those characters, because they're not, what you see on TV is not exactly who they are behind the scenes. Some of them are, some of them aren't, but a lot of the guys are really nice people. And you'd be surprised at just how friendly and nice they are. I think a lot of people are afraid to walk up to a wrestler and say hello. The truth is, it's like going to your next door neighbor. It's the same type of person. They're no different. They just have a different job. That's it. And they're more than willing to talk to you. And most of the guys are really nice.
Yeah, I have heard some stories about, running into wrestlers at like airports and things like that, and
Yep.
the whole deal there. So I completely understand why that may be, scary to do that. But it's just, if you just see them like 10, if you're 10 feet away from them, I don't think it's such a big deal.
No, no. What they really don't like in the airports, especially, is when people come up to them and I've seen that happen before. They'll come up and I'm trying to find something I can use, but I don't.
Yeah.
But they'll have a stack of stuff that they want signed, and it's not because, oh, hey, wow, you're here. They've been waiting for that person to come off the airplane to sign all this merchandise so they can make money. In the meantime, the wrestler's trying to travel, and travel is the worst part of the job
Oh yeah.
because you're constantly on the road and you're constantly tired. So when you have somebody come up to you, you might have somebody go, hey, can you sign an autograph for me like a kid? Well, of course you'll sign that. That's just one thing. But when you got somebody with a stack of stuff that wants you to sit there for 15 minutes signing your name, that's not appropriate and you shouldn't do it. And you're
No.
trying to make money, and the guy that or the woman who you're trying to get the autograph from knows that. They're not stupid. And they got other things they got to do. They want to be nice, but at the same time, they got to be professional and keep going where they got to go.
Sure, it's a drain,
Yeah,
being on the road, 4 or 5 days a week, not seeing your family, having people just a slew of people just come up to you. I mean, it's exhausting.
Oh yeah, yeah. It really the what happens outside the ring is probably really where the real work is when it comes to professional wrestling. Inside the ring, for a lot of guys, that's our playground. We get to have fun, be somebody else, do our performance and competition in there and get it over with, and make the fans believe and want to come back and see another match. That's the fun part. Everything else outside of that, there's a lot of work involved. And I know a lot of people say, oh man, these wrestlers make a ton of money and all they got to do is go in the wrestling ring for 20, 30 minutes and that's it. No, no, no. That's a long day. Most wrestlers are probably getting up around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning if they worked the night before. Then they're going to the gym, finding something to eat that is healthy for them to eat. Then they got to get a tan if they got to get a tan somewhere. Then they got to get on the road and head to the arena. And then you get to the arena and you're inside an arena. And if you ever get behind the scenes in an arena, it's concrete walls everywhere. That's all you see all day are just concrete walls unless you step outside. So it's not a glamorous life like a lot of people think. It can be at times, but more times than not, people are really working and they're working hard. And that's mainly through the travel and the other stuff outside of the ring.
It's Hollywood. Essentially, it's show. Chris Jericho said it best. It's show business boot camp. You're training to be, a superstar, literally.
Yep. And that's the truth. And I think that when it comes to wrestling, that, if you're looking to get into acting of any type, wrestling is the best place to go because the improv you have to do with professional wrestling is extremely useful for guys. And the most successful guys can do improv, and they learn that through the process of professional wrestling.
Who do you think the best, in your opinion, people that can improv are?
Chris Jericho, number one, probably. He has the ability just to reinvent himself every time he gets into a match. If you notice, like even in AEW, he can work a match as one type of a character, and then the following week he can switch out and be somebody completely different, and you believe it. It's that fast in most cases. Chris Jericho would probably be really, as far as I'm concerned, the number one.
Oh, no doubt about that. His stuff with Kevin Owens is still like Hall of Fame worthy stuff.
Yep.
To this day.
That's where, they had the ability to be funny and serious. And that is a true talent, because if you can make fans laugh and get pissed off at you at the same time, you're doing really good.
Oh, yeah. People wanted to see what they were up to every week. Every week. It's amazing how they're able to do that. Yeah. So you got into wrestling. You're in the business. Tell me about the training process.
For me, it was different. Training for me, I was in radio we were doing I'm trying to get it out of my mouth now. I can't think of what it's, the sheriff's department and the police department were having a benefit football game, flag football. And they wanted something that intermission that fans could watch, in between, during the halftime. Well, they came to the radio station I was working at the time and said, "Hey, how about we do a wrestling match? The radio station versus the fire department." Yeah, okay. So we went out there and we just put some rope around cans. It was not even a real wrestling ring.
Yeah.
But we put on a performance there, and I was one of the guys that got in there, and a promoter was in the stands. And I did not know this, but after we finished, a promoter came down and found me and said, "Hey, you need to come train with us. I think you might have something there." And so I ended up going in and training one time, and took a couple of bumps just to see if I can handle the bumps. And that's the worst part. And once they saw I can handle the bumps, they put me in the ring. And when I said they put me in the ring, the next show they had me in the ring. I wasn't even ready. I was scared to death. But they knew something, I guess, because the fans loved me from the second I came out. I don't know why that was. They just took to me. And from that point forward, I had a jetpack on my back, and I was trying to train while I was wrestling, and that was difficult. But most people don't do it that way. Most people, and what you should do, is go to a wrestling school, a real wrestling school, go through months of training, learn how to do it properly, not just how to take the bumps and do the moves, but also how to express yourself and be a character and many other things. There's a lot to professional wrestling that people don't realize. Most of it's how to keep your body in shape, how to eat correctly, how to use your time wisely when it comes to let's say podcasts or anything else. There's only so much you can do in a day, so you've really got to juggle stuff around. But you learn all that if you go to a good wrestling school. They'll teach you how to do that. And then once you get in somewhere like WWE, then there's a whole new boot camp. You're still learning when you get there. They're still training there as well.
They've got so many wrestling schools across the country, and they, like you said, they teach all those lessons and so much more. So just there's a wealth of knowledge that you can take from it, but it's, your story is just, may not be the most traditional way, but I find that very interesting.
Yeah, I hate to say it because I always hate to even talk about that sometimes, because a lot of the guys, they'll be like, "Oh God, he didn't even get really trained." I didn't. And I openly say that I did not get properly trained. I was training in the ring, it was trial by fire. And I've always kind of worked that way. So I guess that was not unusual for me to be, thrown into it that way. Radio was the same way. Even when I got in the radio, I just jumped in with both feet and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And, and it's just a matter of just kind of giving in and saying, you know what, I'm going to give myself to whatever it is I'm doing, and I'm going to give it 100% and see what happens.
And sometimes you got to do that. You got to take a chance.
Yes.
And take risks.
Without taking chances, you don't go forward. And that's the honest truth. I can tell anybody, and I'll tell my grandbabies this all the time. You've got to take chances. Without taking a chance, you never know. I'm 60 years old, just so people know. I'm 60 years old, and I started in the wrestling business at the age of 38, which is real late. That's really late. I broke my neck over time, just not in one match, but over a period of time. I caused enough damage that I ended up having to get my neck fixed. And so I was out of wrestling for 10 years because of that. But the passion for wrestling was still there, and I wanted to come back, and I did. I came back after 10 years of, after my broken neck, taking care of my father, who had passed away eventually from Alzheimer's. And I took care of him for about 5 years. So when I came back, I was real depressed. I didn't even realize I was depressed. It was my wife who finally kind of said, I'm getting a little bit worried about you because you just don't seem like yourself. And I realized, I got to make a change. And that's when wrestling basically came back and saved my life, because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back to where I was when I was happy. And I remember the last time I was happy was when I was wrestling in the ring. So I made a point of getting myself back in the gym, getting in shape, and having one last match against the guy who I had a major feud with prior to my leaving wrestling. And that did wonders for me. It made me feel 100% again. It helped get rid of that depression. I won't say it's gone completely. I still deal with it on a regular basis. But my wrestling career and my outlook on life is so much better. And it all has to do with wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, you found a passion that you love, and it's always been around in one form of another. Wrestling is something I feel like that will always be there for all of us that are fans.
Yes.
But 38 years old, getting trained, what a what an incredible story that is.
I,
Getting to do that.
it's one of those things that as a kid, you imagine yourself as a wrestler. If you're a wrestling fan, you imagine yourself as the good guy in the ring, beating up the bad guy, and hearing all the fans cheer. And I got to live that. And that is something I've always said. If the Lord decided to take me today, I'm okay with that. I don't want to go anywhere today, mind you that, but I have lived a great life. I've done more in my life through radio and wrestling than I would ever have imagined that I could have done. Got to meet people I never knew I'd get to meet, meeting legends that, I never thought I'd even be able to sit down and have dinner with. And it's just something that for me, I am personally very proud of what I've done so far in life. I hear people always say, well, you're never going to make it to the WWE. I'm only 60 years old. I still got another 20 years. Who knows?
And never say never, right?
That's right.
No better time than the present.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm always saying it out there. I'm putting it out there. I don't mind taking those chances. I don't mind large crowds. I've worked in front of crowds of 10,000 for a different event, not for wrestling. And it didn't bother me. That stuff just doesn't shake me. So I actually get a thrill from it. The more people, the more thrill you get, because there is a certain amount of a high that you get when you get into a wrestling ring and you get that adrenaline rush that's coming and the fans are there. And it's just a lot of fun. And it's a great time for anybody. And I suggest anybody who's ever thought about wrestling, go find a school, live that dream, because you don't want to end up getting 60 years old going, I should have done this and I should have done that. And I wish I had tried that. You'll kick yourself if you do that.
No, live life with no regrets. I love that
Absolutely.
mantra. I've been living that mantra for the last several years, and I plan on keeping that mantra.
Yep.
Who are like some opponents that you enjoyed being in the ring with?
I got two in particular that I can tell you about. The guy who I wrestled when I came back from my return match was a guy by the name of Mike Stratus. And Mike Stratus and I, we're about the same height and size. We were really kind of big, muscular guys back then. I was much bigger than I am now. But at that time, Mike and I, we just matched up well. He was a great heel, and he could make people hate him and just want to beat him up. And you got to have a great heel to make a great face. And he made me a great face. We had match after match, most of those matches inside a steel cage or a dog collar match, something like that. And that reminds me of another person that I started my career with. The first main event match I had was against a guy named Preston Paradise, the Platinum Playboy. And during that time, again, now I'm about 38, 39, I guess, at that point, because I've only been in it for about a year. And as I'm sitting there, he comes out in the ring working a match. He comes out, goes to my wife in the stands, and everybody in there knew who my wife was. He went to my wife in the stands and started flirting with her during my match. Yeah, that didn't go over too well. So we ended up having a huge feud, and it ended up being a giant cage match called Rage in the Cage. And that match got picked up by Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper saw that match and he loved the match, and he ended up putting it on his website at the time. Now, I know that sounds like it's not a big deal, but back then websites were just starting.
Yeah.
So Roddy Piper had a website, and they took that match and put it on his website because he had requested it. And that just, to me, is one of the greatest moments of my wrestling career. Even though it was in my first year, it was one of the greatest moments because it was my first main event match. It was recognized by Roddy Piper, and the fans loved it. Not only did the fans love it, but the guys in the back had come out and got into the crowd to watch this match. So you had the boys watching the match as well as having the fans there. And that really was a lot of fun. And when the match was over with, you can find this on my Facebook page too, by the way. I came over the top of the cage and won. When I won that match, the fans came out of the stands and started surrounding me on the floor around the ring, which really freaked me out at the beginning because I was bleeding blood everywhere. So,
Oh, yeah. I mean, if a legend like Roddy Piper, gives you the nod, you've made it.
I never took it that way, though. I didn't say to myself, well, I made it now. Roddy did it. It just forced me to make sure that I kept doing my best so that maybe he'd do it again. Maybe he'd find another match he'd like. And he did later on. We had another match, and he ended up putting that on the side as well. So I didn't look at it as I made it. I just looked at it as, ooh, something else to reach for. It's
Yeah.
always, I'm always pushing myself to reach for something else, because at my age of 60, you get to a point where you run out of things to strive for. And that gets kind of boring. You sit around going, okay, what I'm going to do is going to sit here all day long, do nothing, I guess. When you have something, a goal to work towards, it makes life so much better.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at all the people in entertainment over the years that are, in their 60s and 70s that are still going strong, I mean,
Yep.
goodness, the Rolling Stones are still at it
Yep.
decades later, still playing the hits. Bruce Springsteen is going on tour, playing the hits. Everybody loves seeing Bruce Springsteen. I
Yep.
mean, if you feel like you've got the energy and the drive and the passion to do something, you're never too old to continue
Nope.
something.
No, and that's something that I really, I preach to a lot of people. I always try to preach, stay fluid as you get older, because you will lock up if you're not careful. It's just like if you don't use it, if you're not used to using your legs after a period of time, and wrestlers, it's really difficult, because when you finish wrestling inside the ring and you're that active, uh, your body starts to get tight and it starts to hurt because you're no longer fluid. And wrestlers will tell you that, especially. That's why so many of them deal with pains and aches after they're over with. It's because they're not using their body like they once did. And the body is going, hey, we hurt.
Yeah, you have to go to the gym, keep
Yeah.
training those muscles so that they work.
Yes.
It's a motion. It's a fluid motion.
Yeah, I've always wanted to. I've told my wife this before. I want to just, at one point in my life, sit back, eat what I want, and get fat. But I can't. My body, my mind will not let me, because I still go to the gym 2-3 times a week now. I'd like to go more, but I just can't. But I still stay in the gym because it's a mindset with me now. Always be in shape, always be TV ready, always be ready for whatever comes next. And that's important when it comes to professional wrestling.
That's that discipline. You got to have that discipline. I want to switch gears, talk a little bit about, you had mentioned you got to meet some legends, spend some time with them. Who are some of the people you've got to meet and pick their brain?
Teddy Long, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is one of my best friends. But also, I have a legendary pro wrestling journalist, Bill Apter. Bill Apter, I've known for years and years. And, he's another one of those guys that would reach out and help me whenever I needed help or make suggestions or somebody to talk to. And a lot of the guys, really, that's where it came from. I can mention a ton of names, but we'd be here all day long of the names I've talked to and sat down with. And most of those times, those conversations I always keep private unless it's something otherwise, because I get to see a side of the guys that most people don't. You get to see the character a lot of times, and I get to see the person behind the character, and they're a lot different in some cases. And I enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that I can meet and talk with these guys and sit down and do things with them that other people can't. And the reason they do that is because I don't talk about it. So, but there are a lot of guys that I have met over time. The ones I can publicly say that I do quite a bit is Teddy Long, Bill Apter. You got a lot of people out there that are just good. Look, David LaGreca from Busted Open was really good to me when I first started coming back. He was one of those guys that recognized I was trying to do something with myself, make myself, a comeback of sorts. And he opened up the door and let me come in and do things with him that he didn't have to do. I have a lot of trust with people, and I appreciate that trust with those people because they know that if I'm getting involved with something, I'm going to do everything I can to make it work.
Yeah, and that's what you got to do. Let's talk about your podcast with Teddy called Road Trip After Hours. How did that get started?
Road Trip, we were working for a company that's no longer in business, but we were both working for this company as talent. And during the time that we were, there as talent, we would discuss different things. And we finally just sat down one day. And again, it's one of those conversations where we were just kind of sitting around goofing around. And we realized that we could do a podcast. What we were talking about in private was like, let's just talk about this on the radio or in podcasting. And he was like, you know what? Let's do that. And I found out later on, too, that he actually had quit doing podcasts. He wasn't enjoying doing podcasts anymore. He didn't like the questions being asked. He didn't like the host. There's just a variety of things he was having problems with when it came to podcasting. And he told me, he said, I didn't have plans on coming back until you asked me. And then he said, I trust you. And that means a lot. Like I say, trust in this business is important. And when I know that somebody trusts me and their lives and their career is in my hands as far as how I speak about something on a program, I want them to be able to trust me, to know that I'm going to be doing the best thing for them, and I'm not going to be doing anything that's going to hurt them. I'm like you. I'm a very positive individual. I don't believe in negativity. If there's a lot of negativity around, I'll leave. I don't want to be a part of it. That's hurt me in the wrestling business because I don't like the negativity, and there is a lot of it there.
Yes.
And I try to stay away from it. But I've heard from some of the best that have always said, do your job, keep your nose out of other things, you'll be fine. And that really is the best advice you can give.
Oh, no doubt about it. How long have you been doing the podcast with Teddy?
Let's see, we are now on episode number 27, I believe. It's been 27 weeks we've been doing it. I did a podcast with Bill Apter before that. We did that for about a year. And then COVID came, and that kind of screwed up everything.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the shows that I do now, I have a lot of shows that are in development and stuff. A lot of those shows came from the COVID area, from sitting in the house and going, okay, what can I do that's different and unique that'd be fun? Because everybody at that point had started doing podcasts, and it had to be like, okay, with so many podcasts, how can mine be different? So I started coming up with different shows, handshakes and hot dogs, promo time, things like that, that gave people a chance to interact with me while still being at home. So they got a chance to have a lot of fun with wrestling at the same time of being locked in.
Yeah, it's interesting how the COVID era kind of brought a lot of creativity in the entertainment world, and especially with podcasts. Streaming's been a big thing now. It's amazing to see how the evolution of media and streaming is just taken off. For sure, with COVID, music as well. Concerts are virtual. A lot of things are virtual. As we go back into the physical events, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, I prefer really that we didn't have so much of the coverage where people were forced to go to a live event versus watch it on TV. Again, I'm old school that way. That's how it was in my day, and I preferred it that way. But having the instantaneous stuff is not too bad either. It's just I think it ruins the wrestling business in a variety of ways. But we can talk about that again on another show. So
yeah, the Thunderdome era, the PC era, that was like it was kind of hard to watch. I got used to it a little bit over time, but I was
without that live interaction with the fans, it felt flat.
It did. Yeah, that WrestleMania, I remember just like they had like some people there, from the Performance Center, but just getting to nothing like having a live crowd. Let's talk about the charity work that you've done over the years. You've worked with many organizations throughout your time in radio and in wrestling. Who are some of the organizations that you've partnered up with?
Mainly during my radio years, I programmed a lot of radio stations, and I also was a general manager for radio stations. And there were two things that were always important to me when it came to radio. It was being the authority on weather in the area, because it's one thing that radio can do that other stations can't, and other people can't do, like in newspaper or television. They have these little block of times where they can get the information out. When it comes to weather, it happens 24 hours a day. And if there's breaking weather that's taking place, I wanted to always be on top of it. At the same time, while that was one of our, cemented points of our stability of our building, it was also that I wanted to have charities that we worked with, especially children's charities, because children's charities drive a lot of people to reach in their pocket. It's one of the few charities you can go to where people go, oh, it's for a child. Yes, I'll do that in a heartbeat. So the Children's Miracle Network was one of the big partners I worked with for many years. I've done so much with them. I've gone to camps for the Children's Miracle Network. I've seen the families. I've seen the children, done interviews with them. And I remember one year, this has probably been 12, 15 years ago, I guess. I was in Orlando for one of the Children's Miracle Network big gatherings that they were having. A lot of families were there, and I carried my microphone and a camera and started talking to the children and the families. By the end of the first day, I called my wife, and I was shot. The amount of the emotion that you get from the families is so overwhelming. The kids who are so strong, who will fight and fight and fight, and the parents who are crumbling around them. It was very difficult to do. And I quickly learned what life really meant during that weekend. And I remember calling my wife, and I'll say this publicly, I was bawling like a baby because it had touched me that much, the children in these families. In fact, I'm starting to get choked up now. So let's stop that. But yeah, kids are a big thing. I just believe that our children are, they need role models. They need people who are there for them, to stand up for them and to show them what's right and what's wrong. And a lot of times now, kids are left to their own. You raise yourself. A kid can't raise themselves. They need a father. They need a mother.
No, they're the future of this world,
Yes.
especially today. We talked about the phones earlier. You see kids now, they're glued to them.
And that's the thing that I miss. I think a lot of kids nowadays, because things have become so much into these telephones now and in the computer age, that kids don't get the one-on-one time with parents like they used to. They don't get to use the imagination like they used to, because they can basically build or get whatever they want right on that phone.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, if you wanted to pretend to be something, you had to go outside and pretend. You had to be creative. And I used to run around with towels around my neck. I was a superhero and all that crazy stuff. You don't see that much anymore. In fact, you don't even see kids riding bicycles anymore like you did when I was a kid. Everybody had a bike. Well, now everybody's got a motorized something or a four-wheeler, but you don't even see them on that. Most kids nowadays are inside playing on the computer.
Yeah.
It's the worst thing in the world. They need to get back out and become a part of life again.
Sure. Tell me about some of the other fundraisers you've helped out with.
I could sit here all day long probably and tell you a ton of them, because I've worked with so many. I would bet you I've probably worked with over 100 different charities of some type or another over my career, whether it was with children, maybe a Kiwanis Club or a Lions Club, donations for fire victims or tornado victims. One of the moments in radio that I remember the most was on 9/11. I was in my office and we were live. Our morning show was going on downstairs, and I'm watching the news and I see the second airplane hit the building. At that point, I knew there was something serious going on. And there is no rule book on how to handle that situation when you're in radio. And we're reaching over 52 counties in the state of Georgia at that time. So we were in a wide area. We had to get the news out. We don't have a news guy, so we all sat around that day and started bringing news to our listeners and stopped playing music, and just went straight on to do our news. That moment, I was more proud of my staff at that time than I can tell you, because they stood up and did what we needed to do to inform our fans and the people who were listening. It was just a moment in my entire career that I'm probably the most proud about, because we put together something that day that our listeners enjoyed, in the sense that they were able to get the information they needed. They need to know about their children in school. How are they going to get those kids out of the school? What's going to happen next? Is there something happen militarily? That kind of thing. And there was just a lot going on. So it was my proudest moment of my entire career, really.
Yeah. I know when I was in first grade when 9/11 happened. So first thing I remember, they dismissed everybody from school, and I went home, and first thing I heard when I went into my car was the radio, listening to the feed. I believe it was like NBC News, but they were talking about what was going on. So that's, radio's, like we've talked about, it's a great way to get information. It's very accessible.
And that was the thing about radio and charity work, it's that you can reach so many people as long as you can touch them, as long as you make them feel what you're feeling. And a lot of people, when they're trying to do charity work, they give people a hard time for telling sad stories. Well, the sad stories are what make people jump, up and do something, because they feel the true emotion of what's taking place. A lot of times I'll see people say, oh, I remember when you told the story about the little girl in the store and Santa Claus didn't get to come see her. And I told that story every year. And the story generated more contributions to the charity that we were working with, whether it was toys or money, because people responded. It was real. They could feel that emotion. And whatever we do in radio and whatever we do in wrestling, if you can make them feel the emotion, you've got them. And
Yeah.
that's how you should always approach anything we do. Make them feel the emotion that you feel.
Yeah. Best example of that, wrestling wise, Roman Reigns defeating Cody Rhodes for the title.
I hated that.
I was not a fan of that either. I was like, they booked that up till, it looked like Cody was going to win. Like I literally was like, Cody has to win here. And I was like, no, they're going to keep that title on him probably for another few months.
Yeah, I was not happy when that happened. Again, I get why they did that, because it's a storyline. They want to continue. I'm worried, though, can they get it back to the fever pitch that they had with Cody at WrestleMania? If they can, great. If they can't, they're going to look back going, we should have let him win at WrestleMania. He's just one of those guys right now, I think, that's a little bit, you can't quite figure out what may or may not happen with him, because there's a lot of fans from AEW who hold a grudge against Cody for going back to WWE. Stupid, but they hold a grudge.
Yeah.
Cody is really one of the better talents out there right now, so I'm excited to see what happens.
Oh, yeah. I'm very optimistic about Cody's future. With everything you've done, in radio and with wrestling, why do you feel passionate about helping out in your community?
Because I think that the only thing you can do in life is give back. You take and you give back. But if you continue to always take, it doesn't make you a full person. Being a full person means giving and taking. And a lot of times, I think the more you give, the more you get to take. It's just that simple. The more I give people and do things for people, it's not unusual for me to have people call up and say, hey, can you help me with this? I want to learn how to write, or I want to learn how to develop a script or something. I don't mind helping. I really don't, because there may be a day where I reach out and ask somebody the same thing, and if we all did that, this world would be such a much better place. It really would.
Yeah. Especially now with the divisive, the divided times that we're in, I think it's good to have a vehicle, a medium, like this, where we're having these kinds of conversations. So it's important, to be, the change that you wish to see, and, be good to others.
Yeah, this world has become a little bit more callous since I was a kid. At least I feel that way as I've gotten older. The people aren't quite as nice and friendly and open as they used to be, which is strange when you consider how much we have now and how we can contact and meet other people. But I don't feel like we're as close as we once were. We were all very trusting of one another for the most part many years ago. I don't feel that so much anymore. There's a lot of division in the United States and across the world. And that's unfortunate too, because that division only causes grief. That's all it causes. Again, it goes back to being positive and being negative. You can be a negative person and live life, or you can be a positive person and live a happy life.
I love to hear that. Mac, this has been wonderful getting to speak with you and talking about everything going on with your life and wrestling and radio. Where can people find you on social media, and do you have any events that you want to plug?
Well, let's see. First of all, on social media, you can find me at Mad Mac Davis or at Road Trip After Hours. That's on YouTube. You've got to go by there and listen to the podcast with Teddy and I. It's a lot of fun. It's different, but it's a lot of fun. And we also do a podcast with Bill Apter, as I mentioned, somebody else that I know. Bill, myself, and Teddy Long do The Time Machine with Sports Kita. You can find us there. And what was the other question? I'm trying to remember.
Events.
Oh, events. Yeah. St. Louis Wrestling's coming up on May 13th. I don't know when this is dropping, but on May 13th, we'll be in St. Louis, Missouri, Teddy and I, for the big St. Louis Fan Fest. And there's also a Hall of Fame that'll be taking place with nearly 50 names that will be there that weekend that you can meet and greet and get your picture made and autographs and everything else. You can get all that at sicw.org.
There you have it. Wrestling fans of all ages can come out and check out the experience. It's going to be really fun. Mac, thanks again for coming on. You're more than welcome to come back on. And hey, love to get Teddy on too. So
I'm
please.
sure we could probably pull that off.
Yes, love to do that. So thank you again.
You bet.
All right.
Have a great day.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.